Did the Democrats and the Republicans just agree to something?
We are insistent that the elements have to be meaningful. The House is ready to act, but the legislation has to solve the problem.
It has to be reasonable. It has to be effective. It has to be consistent with American values.
You just heard the House Speaker, a Republican, use the word meaningful, and the House Minority Leader, a Democrat, use the word effective. That, my friends, is what we in Washington, D.C. speak call an agreement. So what needs to be so effective and meaningful? New legislation on the border. After a high-stakes meeting between the top Democrat and Republican leaders in both the House and the Senate with the president today, it looks like Democrats are willing to cut a deal on the border and Republicans are ready to cut a deal on Ukraine. Now, those deals haven't been made yet, but it looks like those two items are going to have to be linked.
It was a very good meeting and a very positive meeting. There was a large amount of agreement around the table that we must do Ukraine and we must do border.
We had a productive meeting, I think, House and Senate leaders. The president was very forthright. We understand that there's concern about the safety, security, sovereignty of Ukraine, but the American people have those same concerns about our own domestic sovereignty.
We also talked about the border and how it's so important to deal with the border. The president himself said over and over again that he is willing to move forward on border.
Now, I told you a few months ago, the president put those issues together in a more than $100 billion supplemental budget request for more aid for Ukraine, funding for the U.S. border, for Israel, and so much more. That request has been stalled in Congress for months now, mostly because Congress can't even come to an agreement on how to fund the basic functions of our government. Now, while I told you at the beginning of this video that Democrats and Republicans basically agreed during today's meeting that border legislation needs to be meaningful and effective, how they get to that deal and a deal on Ukraine is still what's in question.
When I met with President Zelensky just last month, right before Christmas, he said that the necessary ingredient is the proper weapons systems that they need. There are certain things that are needed to ensure that they can prevail. We need the questions answered about the strategy, about the end game, and about the accountability for the precious treasure of the American people. We understand that all these things are important, but we must insist that the border be the top priority. I think we have some consensus around that table. Everyone understands the urgency of that.
The only way we will do border and Ukraine, or even either of them, is bipartisan. You cannot do things with one party in a divided Congress. And so anyone who says, any party that says do it my way or no way, we're not going to get anything done.
The Senate Majority Leader says despite all of that, he is hopeful that if they can get the government funded before a government shutdown this Friday, he hopes this border and Ukraine funding package could get to the floor as soon as next week.